the new campaign ad. And today, amid all the criticism, the president is helping to divide the country instead of unifying it. Team Trump announced plans for a rally next week in Arizona, a state with 2 Republican senators who are frequent sparring partners of the president. This just yesterday when a reporter at that event mentioned Senator John McCain.
Senator McCain has called on you to defend your National Security Advisor, H.R. McMaster, against these attacks.
I did it the last time.
And he called on it again, linking the
Senator
state
McCain?
to the alt-right. And
Senator McCain, you mean the one who voted against Obamacare?
And he said
Who is Senator? You mean Senator McCain who voted against us getting good health care?
McCain said that the alt-right is behind these attacks, and he linked that same group to those who perpetrated the attack in Charlottesville.
Well, I don't know. I can't tell you. I'm sure Senator McCain must know what he's talking about.
It's not so much about Senator McCain or just going to Arizona, but he loves sparring and he's good at it. And is that all he wants to do?
I think so. He loves these rallies.
Yeah.
They make him feel good. And he's going right into a place where, again, he'll be surrounded by supporters who are going to be reinforcing him and reinforcing all of the little battles that he is waging. At the same time, I could see this crowd being explosively positive towards him if he calls out Senator McCain or Senator Flake from the stage, which only serves to just continue to keep the country divided and keep the White House in a really sort of defensive position.
He didn't go to the memorial service today. They say there are no plans to go to Charlottesville at all. As we sit here today, we do not believe he has yet reached out to the family of the victim. They launch campaign ads and they go have political rallies with a crowd of people who they know are going to tell him how great he is. He's at 35% in the polls. Can they do the math? Is there anyone around him who can do the math?
I'm not sure necessarily at this point that the math, that there's a move he can make to correct the math in this moment. He needs a bigger thing that's not really on this topic. He's missed this moment.
Well, he has to want it. He has to want it and he has to mean it. We keep talking about this as some tactical political decision, you know, aha, here's the file. It has to come from him.
Right. I think that's right. And sort of when we talk about the staff and the staff, you know, kind of gives blind quotes to papers or CNN, it's almost like they're sort of hostages. But in reality, I think they're really enablers, right? I mean, you imagine that at maybe some point they could have cut that press conference off. Instead, they let.
I'm not sure about that. I get your point. You're exactly right. Somebody should have cut the power to the building or something.
Or just last question, right? I mean, that's something that press people sometimes do in those situations. And there is John Kelly, you know, and he was supposed to be the great savior, right? And bring order and discipline and focus. This idea that they didn't know that this was a possibility. Apparently, the president has been fuming about this for days. The idea that they didn't suspect that he might go out there.
He had the speech in his pocket.
He was
ready for it.
To borrow a phrase, he was locked and loaded when he walked into that lobby. To that point, we're having this conversation. Hope Hicks, who came from the Trump Organization, a loyal spokeswoman for the president, someone who was at his side during the campaign, who has made it clear she views her job to defend the Trump brand. She's the interim communications director. That job at the White House is normally the president's about to give a big speech. Here's the themes we want to talk about. And now I'm going to use my apparatus to reach out to the Republican governors, to the interest groups involved, to people around the country, so that we have an echo chamber. Nothing against Hope Hicks, who is a loyal person to the president. You see her experience there, 28 years old, comes out of the New York Trump Organization. Maybe they hire the right deputies for this, but she is not, by training and experience, anywhere close to a traditional White House communications director. This tells me that the president is saying, the people who work for me will protect me, period. That's my job, not to be president.
Well, I mean, a couple things. One, Hope really has viewed her job from the beginning as a megaphone for what the president and then the candidate wanted to say. You don't see her on camera. She's not sitting around on panels. She's not telling you what the president's policies are. She is just, again, creating this megaphone so the information gets out. But in the White House, her job has really kind of been the Trump whisperer. She puts people in front of the president. She puts information in front of the president. We know John Kelly is trying to streamline that. So in that sense, giving her a more defined role with more defined responsibilities may take her a little bit further afield from the role of Trump whisperer. But you have to remember how the president is watching all of this play out. He had really bad poll numbers during the campaign. There were, I can't even count the moments where our jaws dropped and said, this is going to be the end of Trump. And there was Hope Hicks by his side throughout it all. And so he's sitting in Trump Tower today saying, well, I won. You guys were wrong then, and you're going to be wrong again now.
He's president. We're not, as he likes to say. I wish her the best and hope she can do her job. Nothing against her. My question is, when will they? There's still nobody. There is still nobody, if you go through the top 10 or 15 people in this administration, who've ever worked in a White House.
Who would
ever
want to
worked in a
go
White
into
House.
this White House?
Well, that's
at
part of the
this
problem.
point,
That's part of the problem. I know I could list for the next 20 minutes the number of people they've reached out to in the last 3 months, and they've gotten no's from. But all right, everybody hold the thought up. Next, the president says facts matter to him before he makes a statement. Sorry, sir, but since when?
LeBron James, the world's biggest basketball star, calling President Trump the so-called president. Andy Scholes has more in this morning's Bleacher Report. Good morning, Andy.
Hey, good morning, John. You know, LeBron James has never shied away from speaking out on social issues, and lately he's been voicing his displeasure with President Trump. And last night at his annual family charity event, LeBron said that he felt it was his responsibility to speak out on what's been going on.
The only way for us to be able to get better as a society and us to get better as people is love. And that's the only way we're going to be able to conquer something at the end of the day. It's not about the guy that's the so-called president of the United States or whatever case. Shout out to the people, to the innocent people in Charlottesville, North Carolina, and shout out to everybody across the world that just want to be great and want to love.
Now, LeBron also taken to Twitter yesterday afternoon after President Trump's news conference saying, hate has always existed in America. Yes, we know that, but Donald Trump just made it fashionable again. Statues have nothing to do with us now. All right, Seattle Seahawks star Michael Bennett, meanwhile, says he will be sitting during the national anthem this season. Like Colin Kaepernick, Bennett says he is doing it to speak out on injustice in our country. And Bennett's teammates say him sitting is not a distraction. And head coach Pete Carroll, while he doesn't agree with the method, respects Bennett's right to do it.
His heart is in a great place, and he's going to do great work well after the time he's with us. And it's easy for me to support him in his issues. But I think we should all be standing up when we're playing national anthem.
It's not to be divisive. It's not to be negative. And I fully support Mike and his message and his thoughts, and definitely the way he went about it.
Finally, the Marlins' Giancarlo Stanton hitting a home run for the 6th straight game last night. He now has 11 long balls in his past 12 games. If he's able to keep this up, Stanton could make history. He is almost on pace to beat Roger Maris's old record of 61 home runs. And if you take a look at the greatest home run seasons ever, through 116 games, you see Stanton just one behind where Maris was back in 1961. And I know you're aware, John, you know, a lot of baseball fans still consider Roger Maris's 61 home runs as the true baseball home run record, considering the steroid accusations that surrounded Barry Bonds and Mark McGwire.
Well, Giancarlo Stanton, if he hits over that number, it would certainly clear things up and make things easier for those of us who care about that. He's crushing it. Andy Scholes, thanks very much. I appreciate it. All right, we have an eye on Charlottesville, Virginia right now. We have some live pictures, I believe, from inside the memorial service. This is the service for Heather Heyer, the 32-year-old woman who was killed in the events there. That's Virginia Governor Terry McAuliffe. You can see him in the back right there. We are going to cover this event for you as that city and this nation remembers that young woman. Stay with us.
Hello, everyone. I'm Kate Baldwin. Right now, a quest for healing in a city heartbroken by hate-fueled violence and a country left searching for more moral guidance right now and wondering, where does the president stand? A memorial service is about to get underway as we speak for Heather Heyer, the woman killed while protesting against the white supremacist rallies in Charlottesville this weekend. A woman described as passionate, kind, and a sweet soul, and a strong advocate. Today, she is lost but not forgotten, and that is why there's an overflowing crowd turning out to pay their respects, and also wearing purple in her honor, her favorite color. Her mother and others close to her say Heather's death reflects the principles that guided her life. The man behind the wheel of the car that barreled into her and many others is now charged with murder. And amid the heartache, a new wave of moral outrage over the president's remarks from a member of his own party. I just got this in from Senator Lindsey Graham's office, and I will read it to you now. Mr. President, I encourage you to try to bring us together as a nation after this horrific event in Charlottesville. Your words are dividing Americans, not healing them. Through his statements yesterday, President Trump took a step backward by again suggesting there is moral equivalency between the white supremacist neo-Nazis and KKK members who attended the Charlottesville rally and people like Ms. Heyer. I, along with many others, do not endorse this moral equivalency. Senator Graham goes on to say, many Republicans do not agree with and will fight back against the idea that the party of Lincoln has a welcome mat out for the David Dukes of the world. Finally, my thoughts and prayers will be with the family and friends of Ms. Heyer as they remember and honor her today. That from Republican Senator Lindsey Graham, where many Republicans are having a hard time calling the president out by name. Lindsey Graham did just that just now. We're going to get to that, much more of that in just a moment, but I do want to continue to shine the light this hour on the life and death of Heather Heyer. CNN's Kaylee Hartung. She is outside the memorial service in her honor right now. Kaylee, what are you hearing? What are you seeing? What's going on there?
Well, Kate, the Paramount Theater where the service will be held is now full as people coming here are being sent to an overflow area. Governor Terry McAuliffe is inside, Senator Tim Kaine, as well as the mayor of Charlottesville and some of the victims who survived the attack that took Heather Heyer's life. We've just received a copy of the program from our Rosa Flores, who is inside. We've learned we will hear from both of Heather's parents, her grandfather, 2 cousins, the man who hired her to work with the Miller Law Group here in Charlottesville, as well as the Reverend Harold Baer, and Reverend Alvin Edwards will deliver the eulogy as he shared with Anderson Cooper last night the message he plans to share today.
If he was at all concerned about not only her but the 2 troopers who lost their life as a result of that group coming here, you know, if they had not been here, no lives would have been lost. But because she stood up for what she believed, she lived a life of significance and not a life of success. The president has a successful life, but not a significant life, because I don't know anybody he's made a difference in their life like she has.
Heather's parents have requested that no political views be shared in a service today that should be about remembering the life of their daughter, Kate.
And there's so much to remember from everything that we are just starting to learn about Heather Heyer. We'll be taking moments, some of the key moments from this memorial service as it gets underway. Kaylee's there for us. Kaylee, thank you so much. We'll be getting back to Charlottesville and that memorial service throughout the show. Even for a man who based his entire political career on discarding norms and traditions, the collective shock, though, over the president's latest remarks is both extraordinary as it is deep and wide. Americans woke up to these headlines today. The Washington Post's opinion page declaring the nation can only weep. The Chicago Sun-Times editorial calling him America's bigot-in-chief. CNN's Jeff Zeleny is outside Trump Tower right now in New York with much more on what's the view from inside the president's circle. So what is the word from inside the president's circle today, Jeff?
Well, Kate, we have received a tweet just moments ago from the president who's actually focused on what is going on there in Charlottesville. Let's take a look at this. A tweet, I believe we have it here. It says, the memorial service today for the beautiful and incredible Heather Heyer, a truly special young woman. She will be long remembered by all. That is a tweet from the president. But Kate, this is something that the president's advisors were hoping he could have talked about yesterday. They were hoping he could have continued his theme of the speech that he began earlier in the week when he was at the White House condemning the acts of hate over the weekend. But instead, we all saw that he took a different approach. He decided to show his private frustration at the criticism of his initial reaction publicly, as we've all seen now. But let's take a quick look at this moment that is still causing so much controversy among Republicans, like you said, Senator Lindsey Graham. It's because of the president saying both sides. Let's watch.
Well, I do think there's blame. Yes, I think there's blame on both sides. You look at both sides. I think there's blame on both sides, and I have no doubt about it, and you don't have any doubt about it either.
So there we heard the president saying both sides, both sides. Okay, that is what has frustrated many presidential advisors. They're being very silent about it this morning, I have to say. There's been very little public reaction. One administration official I talked to earlier this morning said this, okay, we have work to do and we're going to do it. But the reality is this has complicated the president's legislative agenda as well. So many Republicans he needs to work with him, and indeed they're supportive of his agenda, simply wish that he would talk about that and would have stuck to the script of infrastructure yesterday was designed to turn the page to do that, but he, of course, did not. But he'll be leaving Trump Tower here in a few hours, going back to New Jersey. And, Kate, we are just getting word in that he'll be actually going to Camp David on Friday to discuss with his National Security Council his Southeast Asia strategy, his military strategy in Asia. So this is something, again, the White House trying to get back on track. The president himself often drags them in the other direction. Okay.
Off the rails as of yesterday. Jeff, real quick, though, you mentioned that you heard from someone within the White House saying that they've got work to do and they're going to do it. I mean, it does beg the question, what kind of work are they talking about? Are they talking about getting back to the agenda, or are they talking about work to do to try to heal the wound that he created with his comments just yesterday? I mean, you have to wonder when you see those photos from when he held that press conference yesterday of John Kelly kind of hanging his head, Gary Cohn, Jewish members of his inner circle, Jewish members of his cabinet, the African-American member of his cabinet. What are they saying? What are they doing today?
Well, I would put them in the category of people who have been utterly silent about this. You saw the looks on their faces. Chief of Staff John Kelly, I mean, the look on his face was very dispirited, disappointed. But as we know, he has explained his job as trying to bring order to the staff, not the president. He knows that that is A, impossible to do, and B, something that he cannot do. But there is deep disappointment among some of these staff members. But when they say we have work to do, they're talking about the legislative agenda. They're talking about just trying to focus on that. But I think that misses the magnitude of this. Okay, we heard the president earlier this week saying that he has condemned those remarks as it was a one-time event in past tense, then can move on. Of course, that's not the case here. He has opened up many old wounds. He has sided with supremacists, with members of the Ku Klux Klan. David Duke, as we know, praised this president. So there's no question the White House cannot turn this page. They cannot move forward with their agenda until he addresses this, and he alone will have to do this. He's not scheduled to make any comments today, Kate. We'll let you know if that changes.
All right, Jeff, great to see you. Thank you so much. Jeff Zelny's on top of it for us from that angle. This morning, another measure of the president's remarks and how they're being received. 4 of the nation's top military leaders, all Joint Chiefs of Staff, have taken to Twitter to condemn racism and bigotry. These men are the president's top advisors on military and national security issues. What are they advising the president today? CNN's Barbara Starr joins me now from the Pentagon on all of this. Barbara, can you give us some perspective on this? This seems pretty extraordinary.
It is very rare, Kate. To be clear, none of them are directly challenging the president or criticizing the president. But make no mistake, the Joint Chiefs have now stepped of their own free will into this national conversation. And I think it's very important to see what they are tweeting. Let me start with the head of the U.S. Air Force, General David Goldfein, himself a combat veteran, saying, quote, "I stand with my fellow service chiefs in saying we're always stronger together. It's who we are as airmen." The head of the Army, General Milley, "The Army doesn't tolerate racism, extremism, or hatred in our ranks. It's against our values and everything we've stood for since 1775. Head of the Marine Corps, "No place for racial hatred or extremism in the U.S. Marine Corps. Our core values of honor, courage, and commitment frame the way Marines live and act." And the head of the U.S. Navy, very direct, saying events in Charlottesville unacceptable and mustn't be tolerated, and the U.S. Navy forever stands against intolerance and hatred. They are speaking to several audiences here. They are speaking to their troops. We know the man charged in the murder of Heather in Charlottesville served in the Army very briefly. We know one of the heads of one of these white supremacist groups served in the Marines. They are speaking to their troops. They are speaking to veterans, saying this is intolerable. This will not be tolerated in U.S. military ranks. But they are also very aware, we know, that there is this national conversation, and they know that when people see these pictures in Charlottesville, they see people dressed in fake military gear to a large extent. They see these images, and now the Joint Chiefs speaking out, and it's so extraordinary, Kate, because really, since the moment Donald Trump started running for president, they had been very determined to stay out of what some might call a domestic political issue. Today, not so much. They are weighing in. Kate?
It's really remarkable. Barbara, thank you so much for bringing us that important perspective. We'll be coming back to you. All right, we're also going to be getting back to Charlottesville, to that memorial service for Heather Heyer. Throughout the hour, we are keeping our eye there in Charlottesville. We will be getting back there in just a moment. But joining me to discuss everything that has transpired, former Democratic Mayor of Philadelphia, Mayor Michael Nutter is here, and CNN political analyst and USA Today columnist Kirsten Powers is here. David French with the National Review, and also White House reporter for the Washington Post, Abby Phillip. Thank you so much all for being here. Abby, first to you, I wanted to get your reaction to the statement that Lindsey Graham put out that I read a little at the top of the hour, and where he calls out the president pretty directly, where many Republicans have not. What's your take on it?
Well, it's not entirely surprising because, as you noted, Lindsey Graham is not a stranger to criticizing the president. But it's telling because it sounds in some ways like he's signaling to the rest of his party, this is the direction that you need to go in, that your statements need to be a little bit more strong. And I think, you know, Republicans have to kind of talk to each other here. They have to signal to each other what's okay. I know that sounds kind of cynical, but this is politics, and sometimes people are hesitant to stick their necks out, especially criticizing a president in their own party. So I think Lindsey Graham is someone who has often been a strong and a vocal person out there pushing back on Trump, but it's notable also because he's a senator from a southern state.
Exactly.
It is important for him to say that, to actually be on the front lines of an issue like this, because this is a debate that's going on in South Carolina too. I remember when a couple years ago after the Charleston shooting, they had a whole debate about whether to take the Confederate flag down. That was a key moment for those lawmakers in that state. Southern Republicans have to lead the way on this, and unfortunately help their brothers and sisters in their own party figure out what to do here.
David, I want to get your perspective on this, because we've seen some other Republicans, big-name Republicans like John Kasich, John McCain, Marco Rubio, Jeb Bush, all of them either mavericks or have run against Donald Trump, notably, calling the president out by name. But then there was this. Manu Raja reported this morning, David, is that the Senate Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell, is privately upset with the president's handling of this episode. That's according to a source close to the leader. Is that enough, David?
It's nowhere near enough. I mean, at this point, you know, what you have, I think, is you still have a lot of Republicans with their heads in the sand, that they're sitting there thinking, let's just get through these bad news cycles and we can still accomplish some good things with the president's agenda. We can lower taxes. We can do some other good things. But they cannot miss that there is a larger cultural conversation. There's a larger cultural significance to what's happening here. And that larger cultural significance can swamp 2 to 3% on tax rates and its long-term importance. And what you had here was the President of the United States gave a press conference that was the press conference of the alt-right's dreams. And that's a significant moment. The alt-right was celebrating this moment because in many ways they viewed that he mainstreamed them, that he distinguished them from Nazis.
I'm only going to jump in for 1 second. I want to take us back to Charlottesville right now.
Maju now has reaction from inside the camp of Senator Mitch McConnell. Manu, what are you learning?
Yeah, that's right. A source close to the Republican leader tells me that the Senate Majority Leader is upset at President Trump over his handling of this episode, believing that the president could be potentially opening up long festering racial tensions. This, of course, Mitch McConnell has a long history on working on civil rights issues. The concern from the Senate Majority Leader is that the president, by his comments yesterday, essentially could be undercutting the years of work that has been done on these civil rights issues. Now, Senator McConnell actually has not put out a statement since yesterday, raising questions about why he has not joined a lot of other Republicans in going after President Trump. One reason why, I'm told by this source, is that the Senate Majority Leader is concerned about this looking like retribution because of their fight that happened last week. Remember that spat that occurred between President Trump and Mitch McConnell that occurred when the president accused Mitch McConnell of failing on health care, failing to deliver a key vote on health care, this, that, after Mitch McConnell said the president may have had excessive expectations about what he could accomplish coming in. Mitch McConnell not wanting to look like he's getting into a back and forth with the president, but behind the scenes, John, I'm told that McConnell has had concerns with the president over this whole Charlottesville episode, wants to make that very clear. I think we can expect him to say something publicly as soon as today on this, just adding another voice to this episode. But one other reason why, John, is that there's some concern about going too hard after the president. They still have to work together, particularly in September, when the government needs to be funded past September 30th to avoid a government shutdown, when they need to raise the national debt ceiling to avoid a debt default. They're going to have to do a lot of work together. So McConnell has been cautious about this, but expect some potentially strong words coming out soon, even as his home state of Kentucky, John, and Lexington, where demonstrations could take place there. Some white supremacists warning that they may do that as well, John.
And one of the really interesting parts of this, of course, is that Mitch McConnell's wife, Elaine Chao, was standing next to the President of the United States when he said all of these things, which I'm sure doesn't make the situation any easier for the senator.
Yeah, that's right. And in fact, afterwards, she was asked specifically by reporters about the flap that occurred last week, and she said that she stands by both men, referring to both President Trump and the Senate Majority Leader. But of course, that adds a little bit of awkwardness, if you will, particularly at that event, John, as you know, was about infrastructure. She's the transportation secretary. She's going to have to shepherd this through, and Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell will have to get that enacted pass through the Senate if they were to achieve one of President Trump's chief objectives here. But just showing, John, that the president's remarks yesterday getting criticism from all fronts and making it harder and overshadowing things that they're trying to do on Capitol Hill, John.
All right, Manu Raju, thank you so much for your reporting. I want to go back to Charlottesville, where the public memorial for Heather Heyer set to begin. Industry leaders out of the President's Business Council, CNN Chief Money Correspondent Christine Romans joins me now. What's going on here?
And, you know, there are a lot of other ones who are deciding whether they should stay here. Look, Richard Trumka, who runs the AFL-CIO, also Thea Lee, who's at the AFL-CIO, they both said that they're not going to be advising this president anymore. Richard Trumka this morning on another network saying, frankly, they hadn't even met. And so this idea of making manufacturing great again, it wasn't really getting off the ground anyway. You can also see Scott Paul there for the Alliance for American Manufacturing, a lobby group for American manufacturers, also leaving. This is after Merck, Under Armour, Intel, those CEOs left the President's Advisory Council. And even more notably, the Walmart CEO, who's on a different advisory board, the Walmart CEO out with pretty sharp comments in a message to his own employees. Keep in mind, Doug McMillon runs a company, Walmart, that is basically kind of Main Street America, right? It's got the largest private sector workforce in the country, about a million and a half workers. He said this: "We, too, felt that he missed a critical opportunity of Donald Trump, the president, to help bring our country together by unequivocally rejecting the appalling actions of white supremacists." So you're seeing companies, the business class, breaking with the business president here because they are not in step on this issue, just like they're not in step on climate change, just like they're not in step on other issues as well. You know, that immigration is one noted a departure as well.
Yeah, Doug McMillon, the president was asked about him yesterday, and you could see it sort of got to him a little bit. He says he knows Doug McMillon, but that was a political statement from the head of Walmart. They're interesting. We talked to Javier Palmeras, who's the chair of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. I know you know Javier.
Yeah.
He's sticking around. He's staying in the Diversity Council because he thinks he can have a voice. How much pressure do you think these guys are feeling?
You know, they are feeling a lot of pressure from their shareholders, from their customers. There was a big online push on social media for Campbell Soup for that CEO to step back, saying it's just not in step with like the image that they want as that company. There are CEOs, though, who say, look, we think we should have a seat at the table. We want to be there and talk about manufacturing and talk about American jobs. But it is notable how much pressure these CEOs are under. There's also kind of a feeling among some of them that there's a post-Trump world now. There's a pro-business environment. Maybe they still will get a tax cut down the line, but they're kind of looking beyond the drama in the White House toward their own businesses.
All right, Christine Romans, great to have you here with us. Thanks so much. All right, President Trump lashed out at the removal of Confederate statues. Now 4 more monuments to Confederate icons taken down overnight. That happened in the city of Baltimore. We will speak to the city's mayor.
He is not a racist, I can tell you that. He's a good person. He actually gets a very unfair press in that regard. But we'll see what happens with Mr. Bannon. But he's a good person, and I think the press treats him, frankly, very unfairly.
President of the United States talking about Chief Strategist Steve Bannon, whose fate is not any clearer this morning, though a member of the President's Diversity Council is calling for Steve Bannon to resign. Join me now, Javier Palmeras. He is the President and CEO of the United States Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, a member of the Diversity Council. Javier, always great to see you. Your group, the Hispanic Chamber, put out a statement after the President's initial response to Charlottesville. It said this: denouncing white supremacy without equivocation or without reservation should have been a no-brainer for President Trump. And the group went on to say that it will continue to work with the White House, but the administration's behavior makes continuing that role exceedingly difficult. That was after Saturday. After yesterday, after the president made even more clear where his heart and head is on this matter, will you continue to work with the White House?
You know, let me begin by saying, John, that a clear, unequivocal denunciation of anti-Semitism, of Nazis, of white supremacy was the order of the day. The president missed that moment. And these are the moments that define a presidency. These are the moments that define a president. We will continue to serve in the capacity, but only because it is my constituency that is asking me to stay in the role. I represent American small businesses, women-owned businesses that collectively contribute over $668 billion to the American economy. Our job is to make sure that our small businesses, our American job creators and taxpayers, have a voice in this administration, frankly, in any administration. So the path forward is clear. We stay the course, but I have to say it is a sad day for the American people, and I call on this president to remove Steve Bannon. I think that would be a clear signal that he understands the gravity of the situation and that he is taking steps to remove this anti-Semitism, this nexus of hate-filled rhetoric that is right down the hall from the Oval Office.
Steve Bannon wasn't in Trump Tower yesterday. As far as we know, Steve Bannon hasn't talked to the president since Saturday over the last few days. They may have exchanged some text messages here, but this wasn't a Steve Bannon statement. This was a statement from President Trump. So why do you think removing Bannon will change anything?
Absolutely, the president owns what has happened here. This is a clear failure on behalf of the president and the rest of the administration. But Bannon's influence and his fingerprints are all over this. At the end of the day, Steve Bannon is against everything my association stands for. Let's think about this for just a moment. Steve Bannon is anti-globalization, not realizing that 95% of the global market exists outside of the United States, and our businesses, in order to grow, must play in the global marketplace. Steve Bannon is anti-immigrant, not realizing that 42% of America's Fortune 500 corporations were started by immigrants.
I totally get this, and absolutely, I understand from an economic standpoint, at a minimum, why your group opposes Steve Bannon. But you're ready to quit Steve Bannon for the president's comments, but you're not ready to quit the president.
Absolutely, I'm ready to quit the president. I don't serve this president. I serve the American taxpayers who put me in this role. I don't want to conflate the two. I serve at the pleasure of the American small business owners who are asking me to stay the course and to ensure that American small business has a voice in this or any administration. Whether I agree with the president or not has nothing to do with it, really, John.
And I understand that, and I appreciate where you're coming from on that. So the next time the Diversity Council meets with the President of the United States, the next time you have a chance to say something to him, what will you say?
We're not waiting for a meeting. We're sending our message right now clearly. I'm sending it right here and right now. He has failed this moment. He needs to make sure that he understands the gravity of the situation and that he owns it. He needs to act presidential. He needs to bring this country together. That's why he's in that White House. That's why he's in our White House.
Have you seen any sign that he will act the way you want him to?
You know, I remain hopeful. There are people around him, like Ivanka, like Secretary Perdue, like Secretary Perry, like Secretary Mnuchin, who I do work with constantly. And I'm hopeful that those voices will win out and that he will see the error of his ways and do the right thing by the American people.
Javier Palmeras, as I said, always nice to talk to you. Thanks so much for coming in for us today. Appreciate it.
Thanks, John. Appreciate it.
All right, the alt-right is praising him. The White House is digging in. Talking points urging Republicans to say that the president is entirely correct. That's next.
have asthma, one of many pieces in my life.
Good morning, everyone. John Berman here. The big question this morning is, what now? What now after the president made his feelings crystal clear on the violence and deaths sparked by white supremacists this weekend? What now for Republicans critical of the president's words on hate, but less critical of the man or his agenda? What now for the White House staff, including those of the Jewish faith, a faith that was slandered loudly and clearly on the streets of Charlottesville? What now for the military, whose leaders have made unusual, bold statements in reaction, if not opposition, to the president's words? What now for the family of Heather Heyer? She was killed, perhaps murdered because of the hate. Her memorial begins shortly. What now for the United States, all the United States, and its ongoing struggle to understand its own complicated heritage? The president's comments have been critiqued and chewed over for many hours now, but let's set a baseline here. At a bare minimum, the president said that folks who marched alongside or near self-proclaimed white nationalists chanting racist, anti-Semitic, and Nazi slogans, at a bare minimum, he called these very fine people.
You had some very bad people in that group, but you also had people that were very fine people. They were people protesting very quietly the taking down of the statue of Robert E. Lee. You had a lot of people in that group that were there to innocently protest.
Very fine people. So make no mistake, this is an important moment, a different moment, which is developing before our eyes this morning. So what now? Let's go first to Jeff Zeleny at Trump Tower. You know, Jeff, they've had a night to digest and see the reaction to the president's statement. Wondering if you're getting a sense from inside the White House staff, the Trump team, how they think things are going this morning.
Good morning, John. The people inside the White House and indeed here at Trump Tower, inside the president's inner circle, have been virtually silent. There's been no comment from Ivanka Trump, from Jared Kushner, from any of the top advisors. This is the most uncharacteristically silent White House that I have seen in such a critical moment here, John. The reason is this. There's not a lot of defense going on. Usually you hear advisors trying to defend the president, explain what he was saying. Well, this is a much harder moment to explain and defend. So I am struck by the silence this morning, John. But let's go back to those comments yesterday in Trump Tower. Of course, they started the week by the president was trying to clear up his comments from the weekend with a scripted statement. Yesterday, that statement was anything but scripted, but it came right from his heart. Let's listen.
What about the alt-left that came charging at the, as you say, the alt-right? Do they have any semblance of guilt?
Let me
ask you this. What about the fact they came charging with clubs in their hands, swinging clubs? Do they have any problem? I think they do. I watched those very closely, much more closely than you people watched it. And you have you had a group on one side that was bad, and you had a group on the other side that was also very violent. And nobody wants to say that, but I'll say it right now. You had a group on one side, and you had a group on the other, and they came at each other with clubs, and it was vicious, and it was horrible, and it was a horrible thing to watch. But there is another side. There was a group on this side, you can call them the left, you've just called them the left, that came violently attacking the other group. So you can say what you want, but that's the way it is.
On both sides, sir? You said there was hatred, there was violence on both sides.
Well, I do think there's blame, yes. I think there's blame on both sides.
And it is those words there, John, blame on both sides, that has put the president back in a far deeper hole than he was over the weekend when he was criticized by many Republicans for not condemning the hate and the violence at that Charlottesville rally over the weekend. But, John, again, the White House, we're not expected. We're told the president will not be talking anymore today. He's not been tweeting about this specifically. He'll be going back to his golf course and resort in New Jersey this afternoon. We'll see if we hear from him or from any of his other advisors. His daughter and son-in-law, of course, are on vacation. A lot of advisors are, as I said, silent before and not defending or talking about the president. There's no talk of resignations. There's chatter, as there always is in Washington, about what people will do. But Republicans on Capitol Hill, other ones we're talking to this morning, John, are disappointed in their president. So we'll see where this goes. One side note in terms of staffing, we are learning this morning that Hope Hicks, the president's longtime communications advisor, she is on track to perhaps become the new communications director at the White House. That is a big job as well, John.
All right, Jeff Zeleny for us outside Trump Tower. I mentioned Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump. They somehow let it be known that they were not there, that they are on vacation right now while the president has been saying what he's been saying. That fact tends to leak out whenever the president does something controversial. Here to discuss, CNN senior political reporter Nia Malika Henderson, CNN political analyst and Washington correspondent for The New Yorker Ryan Lizza, and Selena Zito, a CNN contributor and Washington Examiner reporter and columnist for The New York Post. You know, Nia, I asked a lot of what now questions at the top of this show. One of the big questions is what now for Republicans? There have not been many elected Republicans. In fact, I haven't seen any Republican elected officials out defending the President of the United States this morning. What we have seen is more reaction like this from Governor John Kasich.
Pathetic, isn't it? Just pathetic listening to this and hearing these marchers. The president has to totally condemn this. And this is not about winning an argument. This is about the fact that now these folks apparently are going to go other places and they think that they had some sort of a victory. There is no moral equivalency between the KKK, the neo-Nazis, and anybody else.
That's just a taste of the words you're hearing. You know, John Kasich, maybe not a surprising critic of the president, but there have been others as well, many others, and as I said, no defenders. The question, though, Nia, is do you think that these Republican elected officials will treat the president differently now? Has their relationship fundamentally changed with the president of the United States?
You know, I mean, if you look at a lot of the statements, the tweets, right, from people like Marco Rubio, others who have tweeted, some of them are, for one, reluctant to actually call the president out by name. I think Marco Rubio did do that. Others have been reluctant to do that. So, you know, I mean, given the seriousness of this, which I think John Kasich there really articulates, this is a matter of public safety. This is a matter of an American president giving aid and comfort to a group that wants to do great harm to other Americans. Given that seriousness, the fact that I think most of these Republicans so far have been fairly weak in terms of their condemnation of the president, not even really condemning the president, condemning his words, but nothing very personal in terms of the president. You think about Marco Rubio, called President Obama one of the most divisive figures in modern history. I mean, those are his words for President Obama. And he hasn't given this sort of similar critique of this president. I think you're going to have Republicans who have to figure out what they're going to do with this president. I mean, they obviously like his agenda, and they have to figure out whether or not backing that agenda ultimately means that they're going to be standing beside a president who, in word, seems to have some sympathies for white supremacists. That's a major, major thing for them and the Republican Party. Remember, the Republican Party has tried to get away from that. I think they're going to have to do some soul searching in terms of their own history with kind of playing the race card with racial polarization through these last many decades. And Donald Trump is just the most, I think, egregious outgrowth of what we've seen from Republicans for many decades.
So Ryan, Lizza, those are elected Republicans. What about Republicans, actually, and some Democrats, frankly, who work inside the White House for President Donald Trump? Our friend Maggie Haberman is reporting that Gary Cohn, who's Jewish, is disgusted. Disgusted and upset with the president's statement. Gary Cohn, along with Steve Mnuchin, also Jewish, stood beside the president. Along with the Chief of Staff, John Kelly, who looked pretty uncomfortable, people noted during that whole statement.
Head down,
What do you make of the White House staff? The rumor is that Cohn's upset. To what end? He's just going to be upset? Write a strongly worded letter? Or?
Exactly. I mean, there are a number of options for both members of Congress.
Staff, the rumor is that Cohn's upset. To what end? He's just going to be upset? Write a strongly worded letter? Or?
Exactly. I mean, there are a number of options for both members of Congress and people who work in the White House. If you work in the White House and you leak anonymously that you are upset, that's not taking any moral or principled stand against what the president did. You either have to speak out publicly and risk losing your job, or resign because you find it too morally reprehensible to work for a president that gives aid and comfort to Nazis and the KKK. Traditionally in America, the president would be the voice of moral authority on issues like this. Since he has abdicated that role, Congress now has to step in and do something. If you are a member of Congress, especially if you are a Republican, you can send out a tweet and say you disagree with the president, but I think we're at a place where there has to be more. Democrats are calling for hearings. There's a rising tide of